Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the finale of the CCESM Business Support webinar this evening, wonderful Tuesday, May 3rd. I do hope that you all had a wonderful weekend and a great start of week. I am Luciana Raspai, and I am the Administrative and Business Support Director at the CCESM, and this evening I am honored to be in your presence. My camera shut off on me. I'm honored to be in your presence this evening. For those who are customary, welcome back, and those who are new to the webinar, well, welcome. This evening, we're going to have another wonderful, informative session entitled The Legal, Fiscal, and Social Principles. As I know that many of you, the first concern that you have when you have to open your business is what are my legal responsibilities, my fiscal responsibilities, and in which legal form I should register my business. So this evening, this webinar was put together with you in mind. And to facilitate this presentation this evening, we have someone, I would say, who's an expert in the field. And I would like to thank him, of course, for accepting my invitation to facilitate this presentation this evening. So the objective of the webinar this evening is for you to understand how to choose your legal form for your business project. So this evening, the webinar will provide you with knowledge to understand the characteristics of the main legal forms, the advantages and the disadvantages but also understand the social and fiscal impacts that the legal form can have on your business. So the run of this evening, so we're going to have, of course, the presentation, which will run for approximately 50 minutes. Then we're going to have the question and answer segment. During this segment, you will be given the opportunity to ask the presenter your questions. However, during the presentation, I encourage those who may be shy to jot down their questions in the comment sections, and it will be addressed during the question and answer segment. Or if you rather ask your question directly to the presenter, you may be given the floor to do so after the presentation. I encourage you to continue to keep your mic muted during the presentation. And I will go ahead and present our presenter this evening, who is none other than Alain Richardson, who is a certified public accountant since 1994. So you see, when I said that he is an expert, I was not joking. Mr. Richardson holds a DEC, Certified Public Accountant Diploma, and a MSTCF, a master's degree in accounting and financial sciences and techniques. He is the owner and directing manager of SARL firm, Cabinet d'Expertise Comptable, since January 9th, 1995. Almost older than I am. So yes, so this evening we are going to have you're going to be getting a wealth of information from Mr. Richardson, and I now turn the floor over to him. While he greets you, I will be turning on the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Luciana, and good evening to all of you who have chosen to follow this other session of the webinar. As I was presented, I'm a certified public accountant, been operating for quite a few years. And over the years, of course, I've gained some experience, and I've come to be able to advise persons who have the ambition or the desire to be their own boss, or to create their own company, or to go in a joint venture. So I do hope that tonight, out of the the presentation, but even more so out of the exchange, a Q&A session that I'll be able to provide you with quite some information that might not be final or all that you need to be. This we can only somewhat scratch the surface and give you information that could guide your reflection and guide the researches that you would have to start or to initiate in order to make your plans become a reality. That is what I'll say in an introduction or beginning. But as I said, the important phase for me is the Q&A, where we can be more practical than what we might get out of the presentation. Okay. Well, a while ago it was presented to you by Luciana, the fact that many persons, when maybe they want to start a business, they're concerned because they have seen or they have read different forms of business, SARL, SA, SAS. Persons might have given them some indication that yes, this might be the most interesting question or the most interesting form to operate their business. But in fact, contrary to what many persons believe, it should not be your first concern. As a matter of fact, it comes way down the chain of questions or of points that you would have to analyze and validate before you really reach to the point of saying, yes, it's going to be a corporation, it's going to be an SARL or EURL or SAS or sole proprietorship. So let's demystify that fact. The form, the legal form of your business is not and should not be your first concern. As indicated, it comes after you have verified a certain amount of points. And here on this chart, we have an interesting presentation of some of the steps. The step one is to define an idea or to have an idea. And that point one, is really the most important aspect of your plan to create your business, because a business is first and foremost an idea. Let's hope a brilliant idea. Let's hope a profitable idea. So everything is to be articulated around the idea of your business. What kind of business? What do you intend to do? Is it a service that you're providing? Is it commerce, pure commerce, sales of goods? What good? What sector? So I would not emphasize enough on the important stage one of having a good idea, having a brilliant idea, having a profitable idea. Of course, stage two, because I could have the idea, which is a brilliant idea, to take people to planet Mars. But stage two, there needs to be a kind of, as I said, adequation between the idea or the project and myself or the people with whom the idea is going to be developed. I don't have neither the knowledge, neither the means, nor the capacity to take persons right now to Mars. So there's the importance of having adequation between the idea, the project, the plan, and myself, what it is that I am bringing to make this idea become a reality. The third step, which is very important, as I've said, it needs to be a brilliant and a profitable idea, which means that I have to find or identify where is my market, who will be my client? To whom will I sell my products or offer my service? So it is important once the idea is there, once I put in Adequation the idea with me or my partner's setting, identify the market. Who are the persons that we are catering to and for? Because that idea is where the profitability of the project becomes a reality, but it is also, it will determine the means that you would have to provide in order to meet the demand or the needs of that market. Phase 4 is once that you've studied, or whether you might be able to do your study yourself, or whether you might have to use professional assistance to do the market study. From that study, you would then come to the phase of realizing a business plan. You're projecting how your business would be able to function over a period of time. And this business plan, this prévisionnel, needs to be on a realistic period of time, because this is what will permit you to see the development of your idea, of your business, and the first phase, because when you're developing a business, it will not be necessarily the phase where profit will be au rendezvous, as you would say. So there'll be in this prévisionnel or this business plan, where you'll be able to see the timing that it will take for the product to be known, for the sales to be developed. And during that period of time, of course, there are overhead expenses, and that is not the period of time where profit will be au rendezvous. So your business plan, your prévisionnel, needs to take you to the timing when you reach to what we call in French, the point mort, basically, where the business is not making any profit as yet, but not losing any money. And then you move into the profitable timing. So it is the 4th point, developing your business plan. And of course, in that business plan, you would have to identify what are the investments that you would need to make. Could be investment in real estate. You might have to build a plant, depending on the business. You would have to purchase equipments and material, depending on your business. There might even be investment in non-material things, because you might want to develop a franchise or have a franchise, and then you would have to pay for the droit d'entrée, as we call it, basically. Or maybe you might want to buy a business that already exists. You might have to buy a fonds de commerce. So there also, in terms of investment, not only material elements, but there can also be financial elements that you would have to acquire, and non-material elements as well. So once you reach to the stage of realizing your business plan and your financial plan, what are the investment and how can these investments be financed? Of course, in the financing process, you hopefully will have to come up with what you're investing directly into your business. And then you would have to also consider what financial aid do exist, or you'd have to seek financial assistance, a loan or such, from a banking institution. So there's the phase 5 and 6, where you're looking at what financial assistance, subvention, help, etc., that would be available to assist you in the development of your business. And of course, financing from banking. All of this is in the projection phase. We have not yet created the business. All of this is in the development of the idea and preparing for the materialization of the plan. From that stage, you might realize that because you've had contact, for example, with the institutions that can assist in terms of granting financial assistance, you might have approached a bank also, and the bank would tell you, we are willing to finance up to a certain percentage of your investment. So there's where now you reach into the stage, should I and can I do this all alone, or because of a certain amount of criteria, I might have to look for partnership. And we move into the phase that concerns us more specifically this evening, which is the phase 7, the choice of the legal, fiscal, and social structure. Which legal structure can best support this business, this plan that you've dreamt of, and you've reached to the point where, as I often say to persons, if you have an idea, a plan of opening a business, and you did not reach the point where you have a nightmare that the business doesn't work, then you might still have to be in that reflection phase. But here, point 7, we've already reached that. And we have to look at what legal structure can best support the business that we want to create. And there will be a certain amount of elements that would influence that choice. Step 8, of course, once that the choice of the legal form, the fiscal form, and the social form has been established, you will then move on to the formalities by the Chamber of Commerce, the registration of the company, and eventually certain authorizations that would be needed, etc. And then phase 9, of course, the materialization of the business, the investment, the installation of the company or the business. And then, of course, phase 10, like the rocket that I promise you to take all of you to Mars on, the rocket can then be launched. Okay, but very important, and I would definitely advise you all to keep this chart, which is very, very important. But remember, as I've said, and as I know that you all have been already informed in some of the previous webinars, an idea, a good idea, a profitable idea. And I often say, again, your idea, because you are in this euphoric aspect, I want to create my business, I have a good idea, I feel it's going to make money. So you are in a kind of a dreamland. You have to move with time and reflection from that dreamland into maybe the phase of nightmare, just in case it doesn't work. How would I react? Okay, that's important. We'll move on now to the criteria, or the elements basically that one would have to consider when choosing and deciding the form, the legal form of the business. And without making any how must I say, line up in terms of most important to less important, because they are all important. I'm just going to take the first one that pops up in front of me. The number of persons in the project, which could be already from the beginning, something that is already defined. It could be a plan that you and some other persons, friends or family members have had. So you already know that you are already going into a partnership, okay? From the inception, it is already conceived as a partnership. You and some other persons have this idea. So the amount of persons or the fact that it's by yourself or not is an important factor. The moment you are not alone tells you that you'll have to move into the setting of a corporation. It can no longer be a sole proprietorship. So that is one of the elements that would influence your choice, whether it's me and me alone, or whether it is a corporation, a partnership with other persons. We'll move on to the another element or another criteria that we need to make sure we look at is the level of responsibility. And that is something that we must not take lightly, because depending on the activity and the risk that is involved, your responsibility or your liability can be put into play. Now, whatever we do in life, there's a responsibility, but there's in life, when we have assets or we have some liability, there are cases when that responsibility or that liability can be somewhat covered partially by an insurance. So when we are talking about responsibility, there are some, most activities where you receive public, and of course you receive public or you sell products, and there's always a risk that things turn out not the way you wanted. So, and your responsibility be put into play. But for some of the responsibility, you can be covered by an insurance policy. When you are talking about responsibility beyond what can be covered, you are looking at responsibility where you and your assets can be at jeopardy. You cannot cover it, or the insurance would not cover it. Mind you, well, I must mention this, that in many instances, you might have the possibility of the risk be covered by an insurance, but this will demand that you respect the bylaws of the insurance, and also you respect the law, because you can have an insurance, for example, for your car, and you make an accident. If it's an accident, really, then the insurance will cover. But if you make an accident and you were drunk, or you broke the law, and the same thing in terms of business, if you have a business and you're condemned, or the business is condemned because you did something illegal, then you know, even though there was the option of having that guarantee from an insurance, but because of what have been done, the insurance will no longer cover you. And then you find yourself even in an area where you could have been covered by a third party, by an insurance, you find your responsibility be engaged. So again, this would be an important aspect that will have to be considered when you're choosing the kind of business, knowing, already anticipating that in a sole proprietorship, the normal idea is, or used to be, let me put it this way, that your liability can be indefinite, but there are now some adjustment where there's concern where your liability can be, or your assets can be somewhat protected, but we look at that in one of the other point. The financial engagement, and I've said it a while ago, when you are developing your idea, your business plan, and so on, you look at the investments that you need to make, and you realize that I have to find financing to cover the investment in terms of the assets, but also to cover part of what we call in French we call it the fond de roulement, because when you start a business, you need to pay the rent. You didn't sell a thing as yet, but you need to pay the rent. You need to pay a certain amount of overhead. So that's also part of what you need to finance. You need to finance the stock. And even though the stock is a rotating something, it's not a fixed asset, but you always have a level of stock in your business. So it's considered as a kind of fixed asset, and that has to be financed as well. So there you might realize that when you look at what assistance, financial assistance could be available, what the banks are willing, how far they're willing to accompany you, you would realize that a portion or subsequent portion of the investment and of the financing would be on your shoulder. And there, again, this would influence whether you can go solo or whether you would have to seek partnership for persons and so on who will come into joining you and covering that financial. To move on speedily on the, because I see we've already moved from the chart, the social system, of course, the social security protection for the investor or for those who are part of the management and ownership. Your personal assets, if you can just go back just a few minutes and I'll run through the others quite rapidly. The social system, the social protection, your personal asset, and this covers or touches the part with the responsibility, because depending on how your personal assets are, you would want to protect your personal assets from the risk of your responsibility and liability be put into play. So that would also influence your choice. The tax system, of course, whether you prefer that the profits be taxed in your name or whether it would be better that it be taxed under corporate tax. The development and transmission, very important, because you start a business, it might start as a small idea, but the intention is to have this business grow, and the development will demand extra financing, extra assistance. And then there you might have to look at the possibility of developing easily within the legal frame that you have. But also, and we do not often think of this, but none of us are we eternal. We would pass one day, and we would also have to consider what's the legal structure base that can, taking into account your personal and family situation, can facilitate the transmission of your business later on. Of course, there's also the part in terms of the business registration and operation that also plays. The business operation, how the business is going to operate. You need X amount of persons, you will need a certain amount of extra hands to help you govern the business, let me put it that way. So all of these that you have here are very important aspects and criteria that you need to look at before you decide, it's going to be a corporation or sole proprietorship for point one, or a SARL or EURL or SAS, etc., etc. Now, in terms of your options, where the legal structure of your business is concerned, you have, let's say, two main routes that you can trot on. It's either a sole proprietorship or one-man show, and there's nothing negative in talking about the one-man show, or whether you prefer that the business exists on its own, the business is not you. If you are no longer there, the business still exists. So these are the two parts that basically you would have to consider after reviewing all of those points that we have a while ago. And in the setting of a sole proprietorship, you are the sole owner. You are the boss or board. Okay, so everything is you. It is you who's legally registered, who's responsible. And in this case, of course, a sole proprietorship can have employees. So that's not an issue. In this sole proprietorship, you also are the one who has the decision in your hand. It's your business. Also, well, I'm just going to read, there's a merger between the patrimony of the business and your own. Therefore, the issue of the responsibility for your personal asset in case the company has difficulties. There used to be a legal form, but just recently there have been some changes, and for that we are still awaiting the decrees in the months to come that will permit us to get more light where that's concerned. So just understand that in terms of the social proprietorship, it is you're the king on board, but it's your responsibility, and your responsibility could have dire consequences, of course. In terms now of the legal person, it is a person, it exists, it has a name, it has a nationality, it has assets, it has all the things that you have. It is a person, it's a legal person. It's not a physical person, it's a legal person. And in this case, in the legal person, you can be sole owner, and we'll see some of the structures that permit that. But in this, you can also, in the legal person, have partnership, and there's where we talk about corporation and having other shareholders who will be owners of the company. In this case of a legal person, the legal representative is appointed by the partners during either during the constitution of the business, the corporation, and in these cases of a legal person, we have what we call the articles of constitution, which is what we call in French a statute. Okay, these are the bylaws that would establish everything pertaining to the legal person. In this case, very important to remind you that the assets of the business belongs to the business. Consider there's a wall between what belongs to the business and what belongs to you. What belongs to you, you can bring it in the business, but what belongs to the business, you cannot just take it and do what you want. There are some very serious repercussion and some serious penalties if there's abuse of assets or of credit that belongs to the legal person. So very important to understand, a legal person is a person that exists on its own. Sorry, it has its own assets. You cannot do a confusion between your personal assets and the corporation's assets. Okay, very important. Let us look now rapidly at starting your business solo. You want to be king aboard, you're the only one. Some of the things that you have to know. In the case of a sole proprietorship, the fact that your liability can be indefinite and so on, there's no need to have a minimal capital or share capital. There's none in this case. In the case of a sole proprietorship, the tax regime is presently income tax. The revenues, the profit of the business is considered to be yours. There's the case of the EURL that used to, the EIRL, where there was the option for profit tax, but we'll see what's gonna come out in the weeks and the months to come. But in case of a sole proprietorship, the profit is taxed directly in your name. Also, in terms of your social status, you are not an employee, you are a self-employed or an independent worker. So you have your social protection, just like any employee, but it is a specific regime. You are self-employed. Okay, responsibility, sole proprietorship, liability, unlimited, very important. But that being said, that your liabilities, responsibilities unlimited, must not make you one time say, well, let me cross that off of the list because I can lose most of all that I have. No, it's not necessarily a structure or a legal form that is to be totally excluded. If the risk in terms of your business is really manageable, then it could be one of the forms that is valid. Okay, managing of the company, of course, since it's a business, you have to do your financials for the bank, because the bank will request it, but also your tax return at the end of the year for tax purposes. Now, in the setting of a legal business, you have, and we have here a few of the main kind. You have the SARL, or the EURL. It's a limited liability structure. Even though we are the legal person, the only legal structure where you can be solo is the EURL, where you are king on board. But it answers to the legal conditions of the legal person. And in this case, there's a shared capital, even though there's no longer an obligation to have a minimal capital as in the past. You can determine the level of the shared capital that you wish, but I wish to draw your attention to this point. Persons believe, even though it's legal, having a EURL, SARL, even a SASU with €1 of shared capital, which is legal, but you will find yourself confronted to a reality when you're dealing with banking institutions. Remember, if you are going to a bank asking for loan or for overdraft or financial support, the bank will look to see how much do you believe in your business, how much you feel that it is a profitable business. So he will ask you, how much have you invested in your idea? And if you tell him I've only invested €1, he can look at you and maybe consider, okay, no problem, but he can look at you and tell you, listen to me, young lady, young man, old man, old lady. You have a business, you believe in your business, okay? You are coming to me and asking me to invest or to give you financial assistance, a loan for a business in which you did not even believe that much, that the most that you believe you could have invested is €1. And that in itself, when he's going to ask you that question, is going to put you on the easy. So you need to understand, even though it's legal that you can have a share capital of €1, your capital speaks volume. It gives the indication to the partners and a bit more, especially to the bankers, how much you believed in your project. Now, maybe you don't have that amount to say you're going to put a shared capital of 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever be the amount. But just know that it is one of those identification element that speaks on the behalf of your business. The regime of the managers in this case, or already the profit, the business can be, if depending on the form, if it's an EURL that did not make an option, it could be income tax, just like the sole proprietorship. It is you who will be liable to pay tax on the profit, or, and in certain cases, there's no option, it is profit tax, okay? When you have under condition, there might be cases of option that could be made either for corporate tax or for income tax. And in the case of the SASU, corporate tax and corporate tax option during a certain period of time. In terms of the social status, in the EURL, it is just like a sole proprietorship, travailleur non salarié, sole proprietor, not a sole proprietor, self-employed, okay? But also depending on the fact whether the shareholder is the manager or not, because if you own an EURL and you are not managing, which is possible, you can employ someone to be the managing director, the gérant, and that person has his own protection, which is that of an employee because he's not a shareholder. In the case of an EURL where you are owning 100% and being the managing director, then it is self-employed. In the case of an SARL, for example, where you have a managing director, a gérant, but who's a minority or equality shareholder, that person doesn't have the total control of the company, then it is the status of an employee, between brackets, that can be applicable. In the case of the SASU, it is president, basically. And in this case, it is close to that of an employee that you'd have. Okay, liability in both cases, but the liability of the partners is limited to the amount of their contribution. In the case, and in both cases of a legal person, whether SARL, EURL, SAS, SASU, etc., there, if you manage as a good father would do, you do not break the law, you do not abuse, etc., then the most you would lose is what you brought to the company. It is your investment in terms of the capital. But that, even though there's the RL, which means limited liability or limited responsibility, but that RL can be broken if you are condemned for breaking the law or for mismanagement, etc., etc. Okay, and of course, just like the sole proprietorship, yearly you have your financial and your tax returns to prepare and to submit. And the fact that you are in a legal person is where the shareholders or the shareholder will have to have the yearly shareholders meeting to approve the financials, to validate a certain amount of elements. So no, mind you well, the legal person has more legal formalities during the life of the business than a sole proprietorship. Okay, let us move on. The tax system, doing it solo. Now, in the tax system, you have a certain amount of options. I won't go much in the auto entreprise because here in St. Martin, it creates a little kind of an issue because of the fact in the auto entreprise, you normally would pay a percentage that would cover let's say the profit tax, that would cover your social protection. But the fact that we in St. Martin, we have what's called the fiscal autonomy, and the system of the auto entreprise, basically those funds, the 12.5% are paid in France. The return is not guaranteed for the collectivity. So that's why locally, in terms of this auto-entrepreneur status, that is purely a fiscal and a social status. Okay, it is not a form of business. So I'll move more to the micro entreprise, and here again in the micro entreprise, it is also just a fiscal status where there's a simplified way of calculating the taxable profit. Because once you are under the brackets that you have there, you will on your yearly income tax file the amount of your sales, let's put it that way, and the tax department will, depending on the sector of activity, either consider that 71% of your sales will be covering the overhead costs and the overhead costs. So 29% of that will represent your taxable income, and that is for sales of goods. Okay, for service, and depending on which category, you'll either have 50% of considered to cover your expenses, or 34%. But no, I don't want to be too technical in these situations. But once you have your regime, either the micro-entreprise established, it is you then who will be taxed on the income tax. And in this case, your family situation will impact the level of your income tax. But remember, in these cases, the bank will and can still request a financial statement. It is not a fiscal obligation for you once you're on a micro-entreprise, etc., to establish a tax return and so on, but your obligation to establish financial statements will exist at the level of the bank, because the bank, in order to support you financially and so on, would want to have more information than just the taxable income that you would have. So just note that these structures here are more fiscal and social structures, more than structures where your obligation will be totally covered by just filing where those things are concerned. Okay, we can move on, because I've covered somewhat also where I've talked about the 34%, depending on the kind of sector of business that you're in. And again, remember that these regimes are regimes for fiscal and social purposes. Okay, they are not a legal structure, but if need be, we can come back on some of those elements pertaining to the micro-entreprise fiscal status. Now, that in a nutshell covers our sole proprietorship. Let's look now at starting a business under a corporation with partners. Well, when we say partners, it could also be, we'll include here, that you're starting it with a legal person, even though you are at this stage the sole shareholder. So it's SARL, EURL will fall as well somewhat here, because depending on the options that you would make. Now, for all of you, you've heard of the SARL, Société à responsabilité limitée, the SAS, Société par action simplifiée, and the SA, Société anonyme. These are legal forms. And all of them, besides the EURL, the EURL, minimum of 2 shareholders, 2 partners in these cases. As we've mentioned a while ago, the shared capital is the shared capital sorry, is freely determined by you in these cases, except in the SA, but the SA is a really large structure, and I don't know if none of you are really contemplating at this stage to create a Société Anonyme. There's the minimum capital of 37,000. And again, a reminder in terms of the shared capital, even though it can be freely determined, €1, symbolic euro. Remember what I mentioned a while ago, when you reach in front of a banker and you're asking the banker to assist in financing your investments or your plan. That is something that you need to keep present in mind. Also, in terms of the tax regime, in most of these cases, it is corporate tax, with, in certain cases, a possibility of an option. Imagine that you're creating an SARL between a husband and a wife, or between members of a family. You can, even though it's an SARL, have a wish to make the option that the company would not pay profit or corporate tax, but that it will be the shareholders who will be paying income tax on their portion of their profit. So here, as I've mentioned, the principle is the corporate tax, but there are room for option for those that have less than 5 years. Responsibility and of the corporate officer, of the managing director, etc. Liability by principle, limited to the amount invested in the company, except if you put it between brackets, if you foul up. Okay, you cheat, you did not declare all of the sales, or you had person not being declared, or you saw that the cash fund was full of money and you wanted to go and serve yourself, and you went casino and you lose the money and you didn't have money to pay your workers, etc., etc. So the liability is by principle limited. There is what I often refer to as a wall between your personal assets and the legal person's asset, but that wall can be broken down if you commit errors. Also, just for your information, sometimes we overlook this, that wall can sometimes be also broken because you go by the bank and the bank wants to give you the financing, but the bank is going to ask you to co-sign for the business. And the fact that you've co-signed for the loan of the business, if the business cannot pay, just like how if you co-sign for a friend and the person cannot pay, there's where you can be called to reimburse the loan. But by principle, it is limited liability. The social status, and I mentioned it briefly a while ago, if you are a majority shareholder, which means you own alone or with your spouse and your kids that are under age, that's the way they look at it in terms of owning the majority. If you own more than 50%, 50 plus one share, then, and you are the managing director, then your social status is that of a self-employed. You would not have a pay slip, but of course you would have rights to remuneration for the work that you do. Okay, if you are a minority shareholder, which means you have 50% or less of the shares in the company, and you are the managing director, and you have remuneration, between brackets salary, there you have social protection of an employee. Okay. Of course, if you don't have if you're managing director with no remuneration or income, then there's no contribution and no coverage. In the case of an SAS or SASU, an SA, then you have sorry, the status close to that of an employee. Okay, once you're remunerated, you'd have a pay slip and you would be covered. Quite similar in the SA. Here again, of course, since it's a business, each year, financial statement, tax return, etc., etc. And in these cases, since it's a legal person, the decisions pertaining to the final accounts, the yearly accounts, and concerning the life of the business, there are shareholders meeting that has to be organized at least once per year to validate the financial and to give the managing director what we call quitus. You free him somewhat from his responsibility for the management that he have carried through during the year. We can move on to starting a business, part 2, the tax system for a legal person. And in this case is where we have the EURL that I spoke to a while ago, where by principle, it is income tax. The profit is considered being made directly by the sole shareholder. But in this case, there can be an option, and sometimes the option is encouraged. As a matter of fact, I do encourage persons to move more towards corporate tax than income tax. In the case of an SARL, besides the one where it's a family SARL, etc., with the option of income tax, but most of the setting of the SARLs and the SAS, SEU, etc., corporate tax. Now, income tax, it's on a progressive scale, but also takes into account your family situation. The more persons that are part of your family household and that are attached to your fiscal home, then let's say the lower the bracket that you would find yourself in. And there's where in a family kind of SARL and the option for income tax, depending on the level of profitability and the level of profits. If in a family there are 4, 5, 6 persons who are part of an SARL and each one of them have their own fiscal home, if you have 100,000 euro of profit, then that 100,000 euro of profit split between 5, you see, it can bring them down in a lower bracket where eventually in terms of income tax, they might be 0. In the other settings, it is corporate tax. And here we have a corporate tax that is quite interesting in terms of the rate. Up to 40,000 euro of taxable profit, you pay 10%. Beyond 40,000, you pay 20%. Okay, and which in comparison with France itself, or even the southern side of the island, these are very attractive corporate tax rates. Taxation of the manager's compensation. Okay, you have it here. If the manager is not a shareholder, he's an employee. If he's a shareholder for his what he collects, remuneration, and so on, and depending also on the category. Here, let me just come back on that. Just here for the information here concerning the BEC or the BNC, when in a sole proprietorship, it's income tax, or in the SARL option income tax, what the person receives as taxable income, it is not a salary, so it's not taxed in the category of salary as an employee. They are in the income tax declaration, some extra categories which you call bénéfices industriels et commerciaux or bénéfices non commerciaux. Let's say if you are a doctor, an architect, or even a CPA operating under your own name, then you will be in the BNC. If you have a business where you're registered as a commerce, it's more in the BIC, bénéfices industriels et commerciaux categories. Okay. If manager, we said, okay. So yeah, we can move on. The social status. Okay. Now, the principle in the French system is no one should be on the French territory without social protection. So social protection would mean that if you have income, you'd have to pay or you'd have to contribute. And the setting of business, since you are either in a sole proprietorship or you are in a corporate situation, well, on your income, just as for your employees, where you would withhold a certain amount and you employee would have to add a certain portion, for your social protection, you are liable to contribute. That, of course, will depend, as we've mentioned, whether you have the status of a self-employed or whether you have the status of an employee. What you have to know in a nutshell is when you are sole self-employed, which means you have a sole proprietorship, or whether it's a EURL with a majority shareholder managing, or an SARL with a majority shareholder managing. In this case, your social contribution, basically you will file your revenues once per year, but on a quarterly basis, you will be contributing to a certain amount of, let's say, protection or social coverage. You'd have for, just like an employee, sickness, accident, maternity, so we call it as your social security, but you'd also contribute to your retirement fund. And depending on your profession and on your sector, there are different retirement laws that are applicable, and there are different retirement agencies that might come to play, and where the total of your social contribution can variate. And let's say the average amount might be between 34, but it can end up, depending on your situation, up to 38 to 40% of the income. Okay, so that is something you need to know. And I know when you start your business and you start receiving from URSAF a certain amount of requests of information, or sometimes asking you to pay, it can become annoying. And of course, you say, I didn't even start yet, I didn't make a euro yet, and they're asking me to pay. One thing I would tell you all, once you're in business, just know, not even chances are, you will have to pay taxes, you would have to pay social charges. Accept that as life. Of course, if you don't make profit, then no one can expect you're going to pay profit tax or even income tax. But of course, if you make profit, then income tax or profit tax can be owed. Then, of course, there are some other taxes. We won't enter into these this evening, but you have the droit de licence, contribution des patentes, and so on. And TGCA, which is basically what you have collected from your clients that you repay to government, just to mention those. But now in terms of your social security and your retirement, and even for those who might have just started, doesn't have no income, there can be still minimal amount of contributions to pay. But in those cases, the minimum contribution is basically paid where you would have some return one good day, the day you retire. So that is what you need to know. Depending also on your status, unemployed, registered on the unemployment office, there are a certain amount of period of exemption or reductions and so on. And that's why it's important when you're surveying all of these things and you're registered at the unemployment office to inquire also at their level, certain maybe assistance and certain things that to which you would be you would have rights. Okay, but mind you well, your social protection is very important. It could be annoying, it could be expensive. Let me be very frank with you all. But you never miss an insurance until the day you need it. And your health is of paramount importance. So having to pay the URSAF, when we talk the URSAF, just for your information, in the URSAF, you're paying for your social security. You're paying also for the CSG, CRDS, and allocation familiale. Some persons will have returned because they're collecting money from the CAF, as you would say. But most of you, when you've reached a stage where your business is quite profitable, you won't have rights to nothing much from the CAF, but you would have to contribute to pay for other persons' benefit from the CAF. But as I said again, just know that this is the system in which we are living in. At a certain time, it might profit to you, and you've been profiting because others have paid into it, but there comes a time where you are asked to pay and to contribute, and others might profit. So do not have a nightmare, have an headache. From now, I'm telling you, just consider once you're going into business that social contribution taxes will exist, and do not let that reality turn you off. Others are succeeding. Others are doing it, having the same laws to live by. But then when you reach a certain stage and your business is developing and so on, there are some adjustment or some choices and some options to make so that you can try to lessen somewhat the burden in terms of social charges, in terms of taxes. And on the slide I just saw a while ago, where, for example, you can, and I'm going to just anticipate, how do you get a return from your investment? Sole proprietorship or regardless. Of course, the sole proprietorship, you take the money you want, you take the money that's possible. in the case of a corporation or a legal person, you can take it either as a rémunération, majority shareholder or not, but you could also have your return on your investment through dividends. Dividend means that the company have already paid its profit tax on the profit, and this is where you share the profit between the shareholders. And the dividends are not considered as a remuneration of your work, but it's a remuneration of your investment. And you do not have social charges, but mind you well, you have what is called prélèvements sociaux. Okay, so just know that there are different categories of, or different ways of getting back from your investment, and there are sometimes some options to do on determining, and that's why very often I try to encourage persons to do option for profit tax or for corporate tax, because when you are in a setting of corporate tax, what you receive as remuneration or paying you for the work you're doing, that's an expense for the business. So there comes a time where you would have to balance that level between how much income tax you might have to pay with the level of income that you receive and how much profit tax or corporate tax the business would have to pay. So you can do some balancing or some management at that level. But mind you well, the more you take in terms of salary, remember the social contributions and your staff and so on would also have its impact. Okay, so that is very important for you to know as well. Dividends, protection, I think and the SAS is basically the status of an employee. So you would have rights to a pay slip, you'd have employer's contribution, etc. It's not in the SAS or SASU. In these cases, you are not self-employed. So it's what's commonly known as well. And in the case of SAS, SASU, SARL, same observation concerning how you can get your money out of back from your investment in terms of the dividends that are not salaries or that are not rémunération, basically. So you would not have your staff in terms of your social security, etc., etc. But there's also government always find means to collect something. And when I say low, in this case, on the dividends there, it is collected by in favor of the social security and the central government. So it's not in terms of that much the collectivity. So I don't know what's the other slide. I think we're reaching to, yeah. Well, the tools, and you have, of course, the different website to get quite a bit of information, social status, mon entreprise, BPI in terms of legal status, you can have quite a bit of information there. Also, the collectivity in terms of the fiscality that you ought to know. Have I met my 50 minutes?
You did, and you even surpassed that.
Oh, I can be too talkative, so I apologize.
No, but it was a great, it was a lot of information, and I really appreciated how you took your time. And this shows that choosing the legal firm is definitely not something that we must take lightly, and that we need to ensure that we go and seek the proper information in order to not make a mistake. So I appreciate the information that was given this evening. The tools that are here are links, as you've mentioned. So you have, there is an application that helps you by asking simple questions, which legal form you should choose according to your activity, if you have to make an investment, if you want to protect your asset. 5 questions, and it tells you which one will be the best for you. You have another one which on the second link, actually, it's an infography where you have a presentation with a comparison of the different legal forms. You also have the third link is a simulator for you to calculate how much social charges you will be paying, so that you can get at least a simulation. Then the fourth link is actually the presentation of the fiscal tax system of the collectivité. So of course you have everything that Mr. Richardson presented to you, but you also have presentation of the TGCA, the licence patente, and so forth, and how it works. And the last link is something that actually a simulator that was recently launched on the collectivité website, where you can get to calculate approximately how much your taxes will be. So that's also something for you to consider. So I will be sending all the links in the chat, and you would also receive them in the email that we're going to send after this presentation. I know it was a whole lot of information and you have a lot of questions for Mr. Richardson. So we're now going to go right into the question and answer segment, and I'm going to start with the first questions. And of course, those of you that still have questions, you can still jot them down in the comment section. So the first question that I have is from Julina, and the question is the following: if there are there any loans to create the business when if there are no loans to create the business, when are then the legal repercussions?
Loans.
Yes. I'm not sure I understood that question clearly.
Well, well, of course, once you have a business or a plan, as we've seen in one of the slides, the financing of your business is an important aspect. There can be certain assistance, certain helps, let's put it that way, that could be available. Well, and you have some agencies, basically, whether it is Initiative Saint-Martin, a certain amount of other agencies that can give you the information in terms of certain subvention that you can benefit from or aid. But in terms of loan, Initiative Saint-Martin do also grant, as well as l'ADI, grant loans that are not, I would say, directly bank loans, okay? But banks need businesses. Banks need person to whom they can lend money. But of course, for a bank to give you a loan, your plan, your business plan, your business needs to be able to generate profits and revenues so that you be able to reimburse. So there is no area where there's loans that are guaranteed that you're sure you can get loans, or areas where there's no surety that you cannot get. It will depend at the level of the bank, because a bank is a business. A bank is in the business to make money, and their business is to receive your money, basically, what you place into your, in French we call it épargner, but the way they make their money is by lending you money and you paying interest. So loans can be available, but again, it will depend on your business. It will depend on its profitability. It will depend a lot on you, in the case of creating a business, being able to sell your business to a bank so that the bank can say, yes, I'm willing to give a loan or so. But that's why it does always be interesting before maybe you approach the bank, you directly. There are these agencies, Initiative Saint-Martin and others that can already assist you, and in certain cases can put you in direct contact with banking institution with kind of recommendation, so it makes it easier. So do not believe that there's loan out there just put down and you just go and ask. It depends on your business, your profitability, and your ability, because remember, a business is an idea, it's a good idea, it's a profitable idea, but the business is also what you call a porteur de projet. You can have the greatest idea, the most profitable idea, and the brightest idea, but if you go in front of a banker, and you can't sell your product, you don't give the image to the banker that you know what you are doing, then that great idea could die before it even starts.
Definitely. Thank you for that answer. Next question. What advice can you give to someone who is working, so that has an employee status, but is also a business owner? They are in SIS. When it comes to the complicity of filing the taxes?
Well, there's not, if the person has an SAS and the person is an employee, basically at their personal level already, let me go be at the level of the SAS, they will have to file their yearly filing, your déclaration fiscale. SAS, in this case, I believe it is corporate tax. You'd already also file whatever be the corporate tax. But in the SAS, you, if you have an income, because as I said, in the SAS, if you're the president, you have the social status of an employee, so you'd have a pay slip. So when you're filing your income tax for the first job, you have a pay slip. For the SAS, you have a pay slip, so you accumulate those revenues and put them in the category of traitement et salaire. And if in the case of the SAS, you have received dividends, which is another form, as I've indicated, for you receiving funds for your investment, then you would file it in the category revenu des capitaux mobiliers, basically. But in terms of your filing of your taxes, basically there's nothing, shouldn't be nothing complicated if it's an SAS with corporate tax, because only thing you receive from your SAS is your rémunération with a fiche de paye, and eventually dividends after. And your rémunération from the SAS and your rémunération from your job are both taxed in the category of traitement et salaire.
All right. So if I understood correctly, I have an SIS, so I have an SIS and I'm an employee. For my income taxes, I will be filing my remuneration from my employee status and also my dividends from the SIS. And for the SIS, I will only be filing for the corporate tax.
Well, corporate tax and of course TGCA and all of the other. But I understood that person is saying that they have a different job and they have an SAS. Okay, so out of the SAS, if they are receiving a rémunération, which means they are receiving a payslip, and they can as well receive dividends at the end of the year or following the following year. So there they would have two type of revenues that falls under the category of revenue of traitement et salaire, the one from their other job, and the remuneration that they'll be receiving with a payslip from the SAS. And if they are dividends, then there'll be the third category. There's the second category, which is revenu des capitaux mobiliers. So what you receive with a payslip and for your outside job and from your SAS, both of you accumulate that and you put it in the category of traitement et salaire.
All right. Next question. If I'm a micro entrepreneur, how can I compensate myself? And that is a question that comes back a lot of time to us.
Okay. Now remember what I've mentioned, a micro entreprise It's just a tax form, a tax, let's say, qualification. It is not a legal qualification because a micro-entreprise is entreprise individuelle. Okay? And in this case, since your liability can be unlimited, you can take everything from the business if you wish, but knowing that your business needs to survive. But maybe to simplify it, in a micro-entreprise, what you file is the level, the amount of your sales or of your turnover, your chiffre d'affaires. Okay? And you can take, because you are the one who will be taxed. If the business can afford that you take all the money that remain after you pay everybody, nobody will come to tell you anything. But just remember that you have a business. And who says a business? The business has needs, the business has application. So you would have to make sure that there are always funds to reinvest, to buy stock, to pay your employees, or to do whatever you basically would have to meet in terms of obligation. And even though it's a micro-entreprise, a sole proprietorship, in terms of organizing and managing, it is very important. Even though the bank account, both bank accounts will be in your name, make sure you have a personal bank account and a professional bank account, so that you do not go and just take off money out of the business just like that because tonight you want a lot of money and no. Discipline, even in a sole proprietorship. Discipline yourself. If you consider having a sole proprietorship, you need to meet your obligation to pay your rent or whatever it is to live, that you need $2,000, $3,000, $8,000 a month. Make it a habit to transfer from the business account to your personal account. You do whatever you want with the personal account, but even though you have, or no one will come to complain to you if you take all the money from your business account, discipline yourself, because that will help you tremendously as your business grow, and it will discipline you as well on knowing that spending is something you'll always find what you can spend for, but you will not always have the money that you would need to spend as you wish. So that's an important aspect of disciplining yourself and doing business, because it could happen that your sales surpasses the ceiling that permits you to remain on the micro-entreprise legal fiscal format, and then you will find yourself into the real system where you have to submit financials and déclaration fiscale. And at that time, if you did not discipline yourself, you might find it difficult after to be able to provide the information to your accountant or certified accountant to be able to prepare your financial statement. And just remember, if you have one bank account managing your personal and the business, the accountant will have to book that bank, which means he'll be booking your personal expenses. So he'll be spending time booking things that is of no use to the business, but he's spending time, so he'd have to bill you for the time. So very important, that discipline is key. Even though you are in a sole proprietorship, and even though from a fiscal standpoint, you have a micro-entreprise, discipline.
I love what I'm hearing because it's actually echoing what I tell entrepreneurs when I do receive them for counseling. Next question: when opening multiple businesses, what should I take into consideration? Also, what legal forms work best together?
From opening multiple businesses, which means this person is already beyond one. Now, under legal form, sole proprietorship or legal person, that business can have multiple activities. Okay, so that's a first aspect. But then if you're talking about multiple businesses, and sometimes it's good to separate if you have really businesses that are not connected or doesn't follow the same, this is of different category. It might make sense having different companies or different forms. But remember, sole proprietorship is when you have a sole proprietorship, you only have one sole proprietorship. So which means you are already going into legal persons, maybe having several SARL or SASU or whatever be the option. Now, having multiple businesses, I would want to even go to the stage, if that be the case and those are profitable businesses, it might make sense that that person move into managing all of their businesses and their companies or corporation and look at, and we are really starting to look at big management into putting all of that into one holding company that could have advantages from fiscal standpoint and even in terms of managing standpoint, where you can better manage the cash flow or the treasury of the business and so on. But there we are really going into multi-business management. But if that be the case of this person, I wish them well. But we need to pay very keen attention to the fact that when we have multiple businesses, we need to look for areas where we could create areas of what we call économie d'échelle. And maybe at that stage, you might have to have a kind of a company that creates a link between all of those multiple businesses that the person is speaking about. I would really need to have more detail on the different categories of businesses or activities, so I can be more specific in my my advice on the information. But make sure that when you have multiple businesses, that you really pay keen attention to each and every one of them, because you might let one or do not pay attention to certain situation pertaining to one because others seems to be more profitable, and then you can get mixed up, and then you can end up losing one and end up losing all. So multiple business, you either in the stage where you can really move on to having a holding company to better manage the entire amount of businesses, either if there's possibility of merging or fusioning some of them, so that you can manage them much more effectively. So as I said, you really need to know when the person say multiple businesses or activity, what really that is included in that.
All right. The next question, what is the best status to choose when you want to keep an employee status all while working for your business?
Now, at certain time, because of the burden of contribution or social charges that self-employed persons used to have to pay, even though it's still a bit expensive, but mostly because the agencies that used to manage the social protection for self-employed persons, they really fouled up. The government created the SASU and so on, where persons, even though they're operating alone, could have had the protection of an employee. Now, I know that at a certain time when they create the SASU status in France and even maybe overseas and down here, persons went crazily into SASU because they wanted to have the status of an employee. It has its advantages, it has quite a bit of disadvantages as well. today, what I would say, the social protection of a self-employed and an employee are quite similar. There isn't that big gap that used to exist before. Even though one would believe, yes, but when you're an employee, you would be able, if you lose your job, to have what we used to call ACD, and have the protection. But mind you, well, in the setting of a SASU or even a SARL minoritaire and so on, those indemnités are not automatic. The fact that you are in a managing position, now therefore self-employed persons, a non-compulsory regime in terms of losing your job, but we won't go there. But the fact that you're in a managing position, those protection in terms of losing your job does not play automatically. Now, if that's the only interest you wanted to choose to go into a SASU to run away from being self-employed, then it might be not sufficient of an element or an argument, knowing that, as I've said over the years, the social protection is quite equivalent. Okay, there isn't that big gap anymore. One of the little issue that I have with person choosing a SASU just not to be either in a sole proprietorship and having the statute of a self-employed person. Already a SASU is a legal person, so you have the need of having shareholders meeting. Whenever you want to modify the articles of incorporation, the statute shareholders meeting procedure, so it's a costly and a legal setting that has quite some formalities that you don't have in a sole proprietorship setting. Secondly, from even a managing perspective, I mentioned a while ago that you can do some management of your fiscal and even sometimes social situation by deciding to take more revenues as a salary, as a remuneration, or more as dividends. And you try to manage the level of taxes that between the corporate tax the business would pay and your personal income tax, you would want to optimize it. Now, when you are an employee, you have an employee social status of in a SASU, and you have a pay slip. Once the pay slip is issued and the declaration sent, when you reach to the point where you realize, oh boy, this year is going to be a superb year, I should have taken much more salaries from the beginning so that I can be have more to deduct as an expense out of the company's profit, so I'd have to pay less profit tax, but then it becomes kind of too late. So it doesn't give you the same leverage as when you are in a, let's say, a EURL or an SARL, where you're self-employed because you're majority manager, okay? Where you don't have a pay slip. So by principle, every month you would say, okay, I need X amount, and you would have the discipline I talked about. But when you're reaching later down in the year and you realize that, hey, if I take more remuneration as a managing director and my income tax will not be too high, but by taking more, I reduce my profit tax. So it gives you that leverage to manage. So if you are going into a SASU just because you heard that the social status of an employee is much better and so on, even at the national level, a lot of businesses are coming back from that crazy option of going in. Sometimes you have certain businesses that could have been under the legal status of a micro-entreprise, but rushed to create a SASU because they didn't want to be a self-employed. And now they're realizing it costs them much more. They have much more headache. They doesn't have the liberty that a sole proprietorship offers. So do not only make the option for a SASU because you feel or you've heard that you have a better social protection, or you would need a payslip to justify something. No, no, no. It isn't. Many companies right now are coming back from what was done in the past.
Yes, and I would add to that also, when you've mentioned about the administrative procedures and the event that your business do not work because you probably did not do the necessary projection, it costs you even more to close that statute,
yep.
to dissolve it, as opposed to if you were in sole proprietorship today, it costs you $0 to close it down. So that are also things that you need to consider when choosing the legal form. Next question, let's say you have an Airbnb, or if they have rents that they're collecting, what would you recommend best ways to declare it, BIC, BNC?
Well, revenue, those kind of income, of course, you can decide to create a company to do the management. Now, revenue, if you, well, Airbnb, which means it is furnished. So we are not in the category of what we call revenue foncier. Normally, in that case, it is the BIC and the BIC category, and they're even in the category, you call it revenue. Oh la la, no, it's missing me. It's one of the category loueur ameublé non professionnel. It retained the category of revenu professionnel, okay, where you would declare. But depending as well on the amount of revenues and so on, nothing prevents you from eventually having that under a structure. Mostly when you do that, that's an extra revenue. That's not your only revenue. And having to add that to your income tax, where you already maybe already an employee and you have other revenues, so it can put you maybe into a higher bracket. All depends on how you're doing it, whether it's an exceptional something or you are developing it really into a business. It might be interesting once you do your projection and your analysis to maybe put it into a setting where it could be profit tax, because you would be able to deduct a lot more expenses and the amortization, etc., etc. So you need to really look. If it's really an exceptional something, you have an apartment or two, then it's really a minor something, and it could remain under your impôt sur le revenu in one of the categories. But if it's much more sustainable and larger operation, the reflection needs to be carried out whether it mightn't be better to put it under the legal person and have the option for profit tax, corporate taxes.
Corporate tax. All right, I have two more questions and then we're going to wrap up. Is the revenue of micro enterprises considered to be full income for social charges, or the net income after deducting the taxes will consider the taxable income?
Well, if you're in a micro, as I've said, you have, depending on the category, whether you are on sales or whether you are on prestation de service and so on, you have a percentage that is written off automatically out of your chiffre d'affaires, your gross income, and that would represent your taxable income. So it is that will serve as basis for the calculation of your revenue. It is not the gross amount that will be used.
All right, the person who asked the question, can you just let me know if the answer was enough, because you also asked another question, need more clarity about the social charges of the micro entrepreneurs. And while I leave you answer that, respond back to me. The next question is, let's say I have a multiple company that have a partnership. Let's say I have multiple companies that have partnership with, and I only get dividends yearly, and my principal resident is in Curacao. Would I still be considered as a non-resident fiscal on St. Martin, and would I have to pay tax on my dividends?
Well, if that person is not a fiscal resident of St. Martin, which means considered as a foreign investor, and that person only receives dividend, well, there's a 0% for foreign investment investors who receive dividend.
All right.
0%.
0%.
Whereas if you are a tax resident here, there's, I think it is 15%, a flat rate possible on dividends.
All right. Okay, and I didn't get any response back. Oh, so yes. So they're asking what, so coming back to the previous question, what is the standard percentage deductible from revenue?
Well, we are in the setting of micro entreprise. If you are in the activité vente, sales, 71% of your chiffre d'affaires, declared chiffre d'affaires, will be considered as deductible expense. If you are in the prestation service in the category of BIC, I think it's 50%. So you'd only have 50% on which you would be assessed. And if it's in the category of non-activité, non-commerciaux, it is 34%. Basically, so it's 66% that would serve as basis for your calculation.
All right. I do hope that this response were able to answer the person's question. I don't have their name. We've reached to the end of our question and answer segment. I do hope that everyone was able to get their question answered and was also able through the presentation to get more knowledge on how to choose the legal form. Through this presentation, I believe that everyone will agree with me that choosing the legal form is something that is very much technical, as you can see, where I know in my daily task, that's one of the questions that I hate when entrepreneurs come to ask, which legal form should I choose, or which one is better, or how does the tax system work? Because I know it's very much technical. And as you can see throughout the different questions, the different answers that Mr. Richardson was able to give, that you need all the elements of the project in order to be able to give a suitable advice when it comes to choosing the legal form. Your situation may not be the same as your cousin, your sister, as Mr. Richardson was saying, when SASU came out, the big excuse that we were having, the big rush that we were having, everyone was saying, oh, they no longer want to be under the RSC at the time, because the RSC was, it was a struggle actually getting in contact with the RSC. So everyone rushed into the SASU without taking into consideration all of all the ecosystem of their project and their business at the time, in which today they're finding themselves saying, oh, it costs me even more. So I'm saying all of this to conclude with what Mr. Richardson said. Choosing the legal form is something that needs to be done after you've done, of course, all the different steps of your project, which is making sure that the projection, whether it may be the market projection, the financial projection, the assessing the idea as well to make sure that it's going to be a profitable one. Then after you look into choosing the legal form. Most of the time, persons go online, they find corporate status and they just do they just do it on their own. But I don't encourage persons to do that. You have professionals at your disposal. Of course, there is a cost for advices, and I know some firms actually, when you do the statutes, the statutes of the corporation by them, they do not charge you for their advice. So again, I tell persons, nothing beats just knocking on the door and asking a question. So do not be afraid to go by a firm and ask them for their services so you can get the proper advice for your business. Before I close, I would like to give back the floor to Mr. Richardson if he have a few words that he would like to leave with you guys before he leaves.
Yes, just two last words. You in the presentation, there's a chart where you have responsibility, amount of partners and so on. That is a very, very interesting and important chart, and persons should keep that. And depending on the answers that they would give to those various elements, it will guide them more towards which legal form. And the final note, just know that just like a person, you born a baby, you move up until you reach adult stage, and then you continue in old age and so on. A business is the same. Do not believe that when you've made a choice in the beginning of a legal form, that you're condemned to remain at that legal form. There's all legal opening where you can move from a sole proprietorship into an EURL, into an SARL, into whatever you wish. So there's always evolutions possible. Of course, there could be a cost, and there's generally a cost in moving on. But when you decide to move, it's because your business have grown. You might need partners and so on. So it isn't the issue of the cost that becomes a real problem. But very important, do not believe that you're condemned to remain with the same legal status as when you started the business. Certain businesses have started as a sole proprietorship, and today they are on the stock market, the international stock market. So that is what I wish, and I encourage all those who have ideas and are working on developing their own businesses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richardson, for your presentation, a wonderful presentation filled with a lot of information. I'm sure that everyone is going to sleep tonight with their heads filled with information, probably swollen with all that information. But thank you very much for accepting my call. And I do hope that I will be able to call you again for another great information. My takeaway for this evening is all status are important. Remember that. So of course, do not belittle one because, or oversee another one because you're cousin or whatever. So just remember that all status are important. They all have their advantages and disadvantages accordingly to your project. Multiple criteria that you must consider. So do not oversee one because yes, take the time. The slide is going to be shared with you. Take the time to balance out all of those criteria to choose your legal form. Very important, something that Mr. Richardson also said during the question and answer segment, having a financial statement is very much important. Remember that, as mentioned, your business is going to evolve, it's going to grow. At a time of life, you would want to probably now to start your business, you do not need to request any financial assistance, any loan or any support. But during the development stage of your business, you might want to inquire by your bank to get a financial support. And the first thing that they're going to ask you is a financial statement to see what is the health of your company. So it's not because you are in a micro enterprise or you are in a sole proprietorship that you are going to neglect those documents because it's not mandatory. So again, discipline is very much important. Also, the taxes, Mr. Richardson was able to demystify all of that because a lot of time you hear, oh, having a business is very much expensive. Very much expensive. For me, it's not valuable when you have it shows exactly why it's expensive. Well, not meaning it's expensive, but it shows exactly why you are paying the social charges. You have a social protection, which a lot of other countries actually do not have. I'm going to take the example of when we had Irma, certain companies were able to benefit from financial assistance by that same social charges that they pay. Also, during COVID, there was also financial assistance that was also made available, and that's all by, of course, the social charges that you pay. So there are reasons that you pay them, and you must not belit that also. And the last, do not let those taxes actually be one of the challenges that you do not go into business, or be your red light for you to not go into business. Again, business requires that you plan, that you project yourself. So you have all the means at your disposal today. So I do encourage you to follow those steps that we're giving to you from the very beginning of the webinars that started on the 12th and that is ending this evening. Again, all the webinars will be available as of Saturday on our YouTube page. The link would be sent to you all. So of course, you can review them. You can also share them with persons that you may know who are in the business, has a business project. And for the upcoming webinars, so for those who probably missed a few presentation, you have the replay, but you also will be able to assist to those same webinars, but this time they will be in French, and those are starting on Thursday. So this coming Thursday, if you are interested in participating in the French session, you may also do that. We've reached to the end. I want to thank all of you for participating. And of course, without your presence, the webinar would make no sense. So thank you again for your presentation, for your assistance, for your presence. And we do hope that the information that was brought to you by the Chamber was valuable information and that will help you to move forward in your project. Again, this project was able and is a project financed by the social fund and the FSE. And we do hope that we're able to bring you more upcoming webinars, workshop, trainings. So of course, now you are in our system, but be sure to follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. We also have WhatsApp. So make sure that you are in our base. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Richardson, and do have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.